Order, please rise for Mayor Fougere.
Please be seated. Good evening and welcome to the December 21st meeting of City Council. A confirmation for the agenda.
So moved.
Councillor Bryce, a seconder, please. Councillor Hawkins, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The minutes from the meeting of our last two meetings, three meetings, November 23rd, December 7th, and December 14th meeting of City Council.
I will move all three of the minutes.
Councillor Young moves those. A seconder, please. Anybody seconding it? Councillor Bryce. Any errors or omissions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Committee reports. Committee Protective Services.
Your Worship, I have a conflict of interest with respect to the first report, CR 1539, and quite a few minutes for Regina, so I'd like to review this.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins, for that. Okay, for the committee itself, Councillor Flagel. Report 15139.
Thank you. I rise in support of CR 15139, and it's the agreement that's already in place, and they're looking for an extension, that the Executive Director of City Services be delegated authority to negotiate and approve an agreement with the University of Regina for administration and collection and prosecution of parking tickets issued at the university. This is already in place, and they're just looking for an extension so that they can come forward and bring a better mousetrap, I guess, is sort of what the gist of this whole report is about. And that's about all for right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Is there a seconder for that, please? I'll second. Councillor Hinks seconds it. Comments or questions on the report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll wait for Councillor Hawkins to come back in. So we'll move to Executive Committee reports. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. So the first one I'd like to bring forward is the Regina Regional Opportunities Commission, or ROC, transition to a nonprofit corporation controlled by the City of Regina. If I could get a second, I'll speak to
that,
this.
please. Councillor Hinks moves a seconder on that. Okay.
Thanks very much. So this is a change. This will perhaps sound familiar to what we do with Everest Place. This is modern governance, but it also equates to a name change to the Economic Development Regina Inc. change. I'm going to just read one thing, if I could, that will put this into focus. There is a mandate here for what was at one time REDA and Tourism Regina, which became ROC, and now we're suggesting another amendment so that the governance has changed. But it remains to create and implement an economic development strategy to grow and sustain prosperity in the City of Regina and in the region, encourage the retention, development, attraction, and growth of business and tourism products and services for those who live, work, visit, and invest in the City of Regina and region, and market and promote the city and region for business and tourism. See this as modern and good. We would seek concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Speakers to the report? I would only add this, of course, would allow the nonprofit organization to seek external funding much easier as a nonprofit organization. I'll call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. So I'm going to bring another report that is very similar. This is the Buffalo Pound Water Treatment Plant Governance Review and Restructuring. If I could have a seconder, I will speak to this.
Seconder, please. Councillor Fundura.
Well, this is very similar to the one that we just voted on and very similar to what we did with Everest Place. I'm just going to pause for 1 second and tell you that we had in-house legal counsel on this, Mr. Mark Yeaman. Mark did a great job of working on this and bringing it forward. It was not something that we had to go outside of. That's because of his previous experience. So what we have is a situation where there are two owners, basically, of the water treatment plant, the City of Moose Jaw and the City of Regina. And so what you have before you is an ability to now change, modernize that governance, appoint a board, and bring things into a modern framework as well. And again, we would seek concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Before we have members have questions, I want to ask for Mr. Archer to provide some more background information since Mr. Archer, you were involved heavily with the production of the report itself. Anything you want to add?
Your Worship and members of Council, I think the decision about to be taken will modernize governance for the water plant, which is, of course, a key piece of infrastructure. What it facilitates is the consolidation of several years of amendments and agreements that, for the better part of almost 6 full decades, have governed the way we and Moose Jaw collaborate to manage the plant. This will have, as its establishment, a board of very seasoned and professional folks with specialty in the water business, who will be accountable to you and to Moose Jaw Council for the decisions they take on behalf of us, the owners. The results will be reflected in the reliability of the service we get from the plant, as well as, of course, the capacity the plant will have for maintaining its infrastructure in a sufficient and appropriate way to manage the risks that it's going to be facing and to modernize the equipment that it needs to ensure that our services are as uninterrupted as nature will allow.
Thank you, Mr. Archer. Now, any comments or questions on the report? Councillor Fraser?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I rise in support of this this motion here, or this agenda item. This is one of those changes that probably won't get that much attention. I think it seems like a small change, but it actually is a really significant change, and I think it's will well serve the city of Regina for decades to come. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other speakers? Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one point of clarification that I certainly support this new governance model, but the federal government has been on record during the campaign to be creating quite a large infrastructure program for across the country. Being a nonprofit, would that put them at any risk if there was an application to be made? Is it better to apply kind of as an arm of the city vis-a-vis a nonprofit?
Mr. Archer?
Your Worship, members of Council, the criteria that the federal government may apply for future funding opportunities will drive our assessment of the level of risk that creating a not-for-profit organization for our plant would present. My assessment, generally, given the history of funding opportunities, is that that's a relatively low risk. And as we've discussed with ROC and the governance changes proposed there, which are identical to the proposed governance changes for the Buffalo Pound plant, in fact, the not-for-profit status actually enhances opportunities for funding that, as an arm of or a branch of a municipality, might not otherwise be eligible. So I think this is a relatively low-risk decision from a funding perspective and probably opens new channels that may not have always been available.
I just was curious because the ROC application, there's a more softer dollars for more operational type costing or special projects, whereas this one is more bricks and mortar that I would see, and I just was curious as to what level of risk that, is there a difference between how they would apply?
Your Worship and members of Council, I would also offer that as both Moose Jaw and Regina continue to own the corporation, we may also, if necessary, be able to sponsor those types of applications for funding and therefore ensure eligibility isn't a barrier to the plant's receipt of any federal or provincial dollars down the road.
Good point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Other speakers? Councillor Donald, to close debate.
If I could just ask a question that while we are considering this tonight, I'm asking where the city of Moose Jaw sits in their deliberations.
Mr. Archer?
Your Worship and members of Council, Moose Jaw Council has also approved the changes proposed here. So with Council's approval tonight, then administratively we'll take next steps to make this reality.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. No other speakers on this report. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Move on to citizen appointments. Councillor Donald.
I'm going to take the opportunity to read some of these as we go along. So I'll ask first for a seconder, and then I'll go through each one.
Seconder, Councillor Hinks.
Thank you. The first one is that Gord Sellinger and Vic Pankratz be appointed to the Board of Police Commissioners for a term effective January 1 to December 31, 2016. That the following individuals be appointed to the Board of Revision for a term of office as indicated. Ms. Stella Descharmes be appointed for a 2-year term, 2016 to 2017. Ms. Anjana Kaushal be appointed for a 3-year term, 2016 to 18. And Mr. Randy Schellenberg be appointed for a 1-year term, 2016-2016. Then I'll go to Mr. Roger Carrier, Mr. Brian Harris, and Mr. Ian Lucan to be appointed for a 3-year term effective January 1st of 2016 to the Development Appeals Board, that Robert Byers be appointed to the Mayor's Housing Commission for 3 years, beginning January 1st, 2016, that Mr. Trent Frazier be appointed to the Regina Airport Authority for a term of office effective May 1st, 2016 to 19, that the following individuals be appointed to the Regina Planning Commission for a term of office as indicated. Mr. Simon Kostick be appointed for a 3-year term effective January 1st, 2016. Ms. Lauren Snook be appointed for a 2-year term effective January 1st, 2016. That the following Regina Catholic School Board representatives be appointed to the School Board City Council Liaison Committee for a term of office, and I'll indicate Mr. Frank Flegel for 3 years beginning January 1st, 2016. Ms. Donna Ziegler for 3 years beginning January 1st, 2016. Rob Curry, Administrative Representative for 3-year terms beginning January 1st, 2016. And Mr. Kurt Van Paris as Administrative Representative for a 2-year term beginning on January 1st, 2016. That Fred Clipsham be appointed to the Wascana Creek Watershed Advisory Committee for a term of office up to 2 years beginning January 1st, 2016. And I think that would be it.
We have a seconder for that. That's good. Okay. I would note that recommendation number 3 is there will be an additional vacancy filled somewhat later as well. That's recommendation number 3. I'll call a question on this report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. And the report 143, the Regina Warehouse District.
These are appointments, and if I could get a seconder, I'll read them then.
I'll second those, Your Worship.
Wait.
So that the nominating committee from the Regina Warehouse District recommends the following: Mr. Don Black, Mr. Mark Hesse, Mr. David Leroy, and Ms. Carly Winter be appointed as citizen members for a term January 1st, 2016 to December 31st, 2018, please.
I'll call the question on that report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to appointments to the Board of Directors of the Regina Downtown Bid. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thank you. And again, I will speak to this if I could get a seconder.
Okay. Sure.
Following people be appointed to the bid: Mr. Steve Enns, Mr. Michael Ash, Ms. Krista Bebo, as persons who are electors of the city, are employed in the district for terms effective January 1st, 2016 and expiring December 31st, 2017. Ms. Jackie Straub, Ms. Nadia Williamson, as persons who are electors of the city or are employed in the district from 2016 to 2018.
Call the question on that. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Report 145 is the ROC appointments. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thank you again, and I will speak to this if I get a seconder.
Seconder for it, please. Councilor Flegel.
Thank you. The following are the recommended names: Mr. Murad Al-Khatib, Mr. Frank Hart, Dr. Vianne Timmons, Ms. Carrie Lemieux, Mr. Tony Coppola, Ms. Marla Preston, Mr. Mark Lang, Mr. Dale Grieser, Mr. Marty Klein, Mr. Jason Drummond, and Mr. David Brundage.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And the 2016 elected committee officials appointments. Councilor O'Donnell.
May I also get a seconder for this? I'll speak to it.
Seconder for it, please.
Thanks very much.
Councilor Hawkins.
So what this is all of the members of council and all the committees they sit on. And the simplest way to say this is that everybody's keeping the same positions they have in this last year. So concurrent scan.
We'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move on to Finance and Administration. Councilor Murray. This is the Municipal Election Expense Sharing Agreement.
I rise to bring forward CR 15-147, and that would be the Municipal Election Expense Sharing Agreement. With a seconder, I can read the
please.
3 recommendations.
Councilor Hawkins.
Thanks, Councillor Hawkins. Appreciate that. So the 3 recommendations coming from the Finance Administration meeting, which was December 1st, which technically I wasn't there. December 1st, was I?
If you're not there, then you shouldn't.
I wasn't there, so technically I should move it. I'm going to defer to Councillor Hawkins.
Councilor Hawkins will move it, and we'll find a seconder. Okay.
I would even bother to second it. So.
Okay, if you could do that, please.
This is a motion from the Finance and Administration Committee. I'll read it. The Chief Legislative Officer and City Clerk be authorized to negotiate and enter into an agreement with the Board of Education of the Regina School Division Number 4 of Saskatchewan, the Public School Board, and the Board of Education of the Regina Roman Catholic Separate School Division Number 81 of Saskatchewan, the Separate School Board, regarding a municipal election expenses sharing agreement. that the bylaw and the bylaws indicated there be repealed, the old bylaw, and that the new, that after review by the city solicitor, the city clerk sign the agreement on behalf of the city of Regina. This is fairly straightforward, Your Worship. What is happening here is that in order to conduct the municipal elections, the city wishes to negotiate with the school boards who carry on elections at the same time to determine how the expenses of carrying out the election are to be allocated. In addition, there's a desire to see if the city can negotiate an agreement which, instead of having the parties to the election pay the entire expense at the end of the election, to have a yearly allocation of expense with a justification of accounts taking place after the end of the election to make budgeting more straightforward. That's the motion, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Are there any discussion on the report? Pretty straightforward. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll move to Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. 148, this is supply of delivery of steel slag. Councillor Bryce, were you at the meeting? Okay. Councillor Hawkins, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. There's a recommendation from the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee, one that the City Council approve Tube City IMS Canada Limited to be the sole source vendor for the supply and delivery of steel slag aggregate. To the City Council, authorize the Deputy City Manager and Chief Operating Officer or their designate to negotiate, approve, and amend a 5-year contract with Tube City. And 3, that the City Clerk be authorized to execute the contract with Tube City. Your Worship, I would like to ask 2 questions of the administration.
We'll just get a seconder first, and Councillor Bryce seconds it, so go ahead.
Thank you very much. There's 2 questions I want to ask of the administration to put this on the floor, both straightforward. The first is, what is steel slag?
Through Your Worship, steel slag is a byproduct of steel production. We use it for an aggregate in our asphalt production.
Thank you very much. It's something I thought that not everyone would know, and certainly I didn't know until I've seen this for the first time. The second question is, this is a sole source contract. I'd like to hear from the administration why they're recommending a sole source contract.
Ms. Gizmo?
Through Your Worship, we've had a long-standing relationship with Tube City, as they are they're the sole vendor within our region for this product. We did go out and test the market to see if there were any other vendors that were overlooked or would be interested in providing a slag. There were none, and we're before you looking for a 5-year contract that will help secure our supply and also just administratively make it more effective.
Your Worship, my understanding is that at the end of the 5-year contract, you will review the competitiveness of this contract before another contract is let?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through Your Worship, that's correct.
And one final question. The price that you have obtained in this contract, did you do any comparison with what steel slag goes for in other cities? And are you satisfied that the price is a competitive price?
Yes.
Ms. Gizmo?
Through Your Worship, we have looked at prices, comparative prices, and we are satisfied. It is also cost beneficial to us compared to natural aggregate that we could source locally as well.
And my understanding is that by having a 5-year contract, you get an advantageous price as opposed to having a shorter-term contract.
Ms. Gizmo?
Through Your Worship, I believe we're able to obtain that, yes.
Thank you very much. I would just add to that explanation that the proper due diligence has been done before the sole source contract has been let, and that the terms of the sole source contract appear very reasonable. I'd recommend it to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Questions or comments?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Fraser?
Just a technical question here. When you talk about aggregate, we're saying it's a...
Ms. Gizmo?
Through Your Worship, that's correct.
So why does this need to come before council, even if it is sort of part of the aggregate line item? Why don't we just buy it like we would gravel?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through Your Worship, the reason we're in front of council is that because it's a 5-year contract that requires that approval.
Okay, but it does make it clear, I'm reading the report right to say that it's a cheaper price than we would otherwise pay for the alternatives.
Ms. Gizmo?
Through Your Worship, that's correct.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Other questions? I have a question of the administration. Just it's the the price of the material over the 5 years, is there inflation built into it? Is there some other component beyond just inflation that would be in the price over the 5 years? Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, I'll ask Mr. Kyle to provide some explanation on that.
Mr. Kyle?
The cost, through your worship, the cost of the aggregates is prorated over the 5 years so that we have a firm price for each of the 5 years. So this not only locks in us on a price, but on a quantity as well.
That's very good. That's even better. I like this deal. Other questions? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have two information items, the Mayor's Housing Commission and then Community Protective Services.
I'm going to have to declare a conflict of interest on the Mayor's Housing.
You should explain why, Councilor Fraser.
Yeah, sure thing. My day job is working at the YMCA, and we handle the homelessness partnering strategy funding for Regina and rural Saskatchewan, and this report deals with that. So.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank
Thanks.
you, Councilor Fraser. So before we move into that, we'll a mover and seconder for those reports. So Claire moves both reports. Okay, and seconder for both reports. Councilor Murray.
Thanks,
Councilor Donnelly, if you could take the chair, I could speak to a couple of the reports.
Before you go, Mr. Mayor, just a point of order. I think that Councillor Fraser might want to talk about the second one, so I think we should deal with these separately.
So we're going to separate these two?
Separate the two, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just a quick comment in relation to the homelessness partnering strategy. This is what it appears to be simply as an update on the strategy itself. But I wanted to just raise a couple of comments that happened at the committee, and members, Councilor Hawkins and Councilor Young may want to add to this. During the discussion, there was a clarification of a restatement of the role the city plays in homelessness, and a caution to the administration that we should be concerned or ensure that cities are not responsible for homelessness, and that funding is already available for both the strategy and the implementation of homelessness strategy and the Housing First strategy from the federal government. $1.1 million a year for 5 years. There's $400,000 being spent in the next year to begin the implementation of the strategy. There was a point-in-time count that was done during this year, and it determined the level or in one sense, a snapshot of homelessness on the street, of course. That will inform the strategy itself. The city may chair the committee of community partners, but that's all we do. We are not a funding partner, and the concern, and certainly I expressed this, was no downloading of housing or homelessness to the city of Regina or to municipalities, and that the concern always has been, after the 5 years is finished, that the federal government could well say, well, you have this strategy in place, you have the infrastructure in place, now you continue to fund that. And we're talking about millions of dollars, potentially, of how we deal with the homelessness in our city. So while the report is clear, and it's all self-evident what it says, the implications are the city should remain cautious of any resources that we put in financially to support homelessness, because the money already is there, and both the federal government and particularly the province should step up and actually do its part in helping to reduce or eliminate homelessness. Thank you. Other speakers to the report? Councilor Young?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The clarity that you brought to the funding for Housing First was helpful. At the same time, we did have a conversation among ourselves about what the city does do for housing and what the province does for housing, and that there are many things that we do, including the new grant structure that we have in place for affordable housing, that makes our city some place where people can find some place to live that is affordable. So I just wanted to make sure that it didn't sound like we don't do anything for homelessness or for housing for people that are in need.
Very good point, Councillor Young. Councillor Donald.
Thanks. So I want to try and follow the conversation a little bit. Has the province endorsed Housing First?
Yes, they have.
Okay. Now, I've heard other cities referenced in terms of their endorsement. Have we endorsed that?
Yes, we have, because we actually chaired the committee. We endorsed the concept of this one as defined by the federal government in its financing over the 5 years.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers? Councillor
Does this have, the homelessness is about building more properties and that. So when we put $10,000 or $15,000 per door, does that come into this equation at all?
The administration could probably answer more clearly than I could, but I think it's a separate fund. This is for affordable housing, is where that money goes, not to homelessness. But we'll ask the administration to clarify that. Go ahead.
Through your worship, our programs, if someone were to come forward with a Housing First program or project,
right,
and it met our criteria for our affordable housing program, then we would consider it under our current program. But our current programs are not geared towards the Housing First.
Right, okay, but it is possible if somebody wanted to, they had a lump sum of cash, but they needed an extra, a little bit, 10 or 15,000 per door, we could do that for them.
Yes, depending on the project and it meet all of our criteria, then we would consider it under our current program.
Okay, good. One other thing is on the programs, like we give and we give and we give, but all of a sudden, let's say the market changes and then those people want to utilize those homes for standard rental. Is there a payback or a clause or something that they have to keep them as in this program for 5 or 10 or 20, 50 years? What do we do in a situation like that? Because maybe we've resolved the problem, and I'm just going to go in, and 5 years from now, we don't have an issue. And then there's houses sitting there that nobody's utilizing, and then they want to put them out in the real rental market or into the affordable housing. What happens? Do we have a plan in place for something like that?
Through your worship, our current program does, when somebody gets funding through our program, they do sign an agreement with respect to the funds, and that it is geared towards that it couldn't be converted into a condominium within 10 years and those sorts of things. So we do have criteria within our program.
Good. I just wanted to make sure of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flegel. Other speakers? Call the question on the information report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. If you have Councillor Fraser come back in again. Councillor Fraser, we're dealing with the second information report on the Refugee Settlement Initiative. Thanks. Are there speakers to this report? We have a mover and seconder. Councillor O'Donnell.
I just would ask staff if we get a little bit of an update. We have not had one for a while.
Mr. Schoberg.
Through you, Worship, our activity continues on this file in partnership with the various other organizations. Of course, the Regina Open Door Society is the local agency essentially in charge of the efforts. Everything is going as planned. We have the various plans in place to support refugees when they arrive, to support them in terms of language, housing, job opportunities, things of that nature, of course, working with our various other partners throughout the community.
I'll just follow that up with some information that I saw that there is not a need at this point in time for more donations. Could I get some clarity on that, please?
Mr. Schoberg.
Through your worship, that is accurate. Of course, there has been a great outpouring. People have contributed many things that is very much appreciated, of course, but we're full up and have the needs for what we expect to require over the coming months.
If I could just add one personal anecdotal note. I received a call from one of the people in my area who is part of a housing co-op that is in Rosemont. They have previously accepted 5 families, or will be accepting 5 sponsorship families, and have a place for each of them. And after some consideration, although those people have not arrived yet, but after some further consideration, They have decided to remodel 3 more units and asked if I could please on their behalf see if there's any other Syrian families that could take those units. So there's some wonderful, wonderful people around.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Dowell. Other speakers? Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to follow up by asking whether plans are in place to deal with the educational needs of the young people that come, and whether plans are in place to deal with medical needs of the families that come.
Mr. Schoberg?
Through Your Worship, yes, that is the case in terms of working with various provincial agencies. Of course, RQHR plays a significant role, but others as well on the educational side. There's a range of supports in place.
Your Worship, this is very reassuring, and I think those who are involved in putting in place those complex plans deserve great credit.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Other speakers? Councillor Dowell, could you take the chair again, please?
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Members will recall that at our first meeting of Council this month, a motion was brought forward to provide a report on the status of our preparations for newcomers. A lot has happened since then. In fact, we have a group of newcomers coming to our city tonight at 7 o'clock. They're due to land, so things are moving forward. I just want to focus on this report, and it's straightforward, but it shows at one level the amount of organization that not just the City of Regina has done. I want to thank our staff for being very much involved behind the scenes in preparation. The Open Door Society is the main organization we all know that handles refugees. That is their job, and there's no different this time. But there are 5 areas that are being dealt with in a very comprehensive way. One is housing, then donation management, and it was referenced here. There's lots of donations, certainly for food and clothing and other materials. Enough said. In fact, a couple weeks ago, Mr. O'Hanlon, who had organized a private donation drive, had acquired so much material, so much clothing for people that enough has been accepted already. So a fantastic job by our community. Volunteer management, those who want to obviously volunteer. Information translation, this has everything to do with health access, government services, language training, all those things, and then public communication. So we're well on our way to receiving these newcomers. And as we all know, Regina and Saskatchewan is a caring and giving place, and the outpouring of support has been overwhelming and absolutely fantastic. So while the report is a receive and file, it does give a good update in terms of where we're at here, and we're well positioned to handle the refugees that are coming in, mostly as privately sponsored before Christmas on December 31st. But after that, it will be government-sponsored, and we all know that with government-sponsored refugees, newcomers are handled, paid for, or provided resources by the federal government for 1 year. Notwithstanding all that, there's still lots of other support that's done behind the scenes, including housing, including employment opportunities as well. So fantastic to see our community respond so comprehensively, and thanks again to the staff for the work they did to help get this organized as well. Other speakers? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to our next report. This is a motion from Councillor Young on Rock Regina Advantage. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. This item came to Finance and Administration meeting on December 1st. There was confusion a bit over the project and its funding going forward. And so the motion was 2-2, which means that it was lost. So this motion seeks to clarify some of the questions we had at that Finance and Administration meeting. So would you like me to read the motion first?
Yes, go right ahead. Then we'll get a seconder after that.
Okay. Whereas the Finance and Administration Committee has a budget to support economic and promotional initiatives, and whereas there is $195,000 remaining in this budget for 2015, and whereas the Regina Regional Opportunities Commission is mandated by City Council to promote Regina and its economic development and tourism opportunities, And whereas ROC, in collaboration with numerous partners, serves as facilitator for a project referred to as Regina Advantage to develop and implement a plan to promote economic development and tourism opportunities in Regina and surrounding area. And whereas the future funds to carry out the Regina Advantage implementation plan will be provided by the collaborating partners in their respective budgets. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Regina provide $125,000 in seed money in support of this project, with funds from the remaining monies available in the Finance and Administration Committee budget.
A seconder for that, please.
Worship, I'd second it.
Okay. O'Donnell has his hand up.
Should I speak to it now?
You can speak to it, yeah.
Okay. This project, and it is a project, will provide marketing and communication tools for mayor and council, city administration, ROC, and other stakeholders. That may include strategic communication tools, targeted marketing and communication strategies, and social media strategies. It will capture the strengths and assets of Regina in ways that enables all of the stakeholders to use similar, consistent, and compelling messages. Right now, the fund has in it $195,000 remaining. This is a grant that the Finance and Administration Committee administers each year, and this is the last year for that grant being with them. That money in the future will go to the Community Investment Grant Fund. It will no longer be with Finance and Administration. So of the $195,000 remaining, this would take $125,000, and the remaining $70,000 would go into the reserve. The purpose of this fund that's administered by the Finance and Administration Committee is to promote economic development, tourism, and culture. So that this is exactly what that fund is set up to do. The project itself is $200,000. So besides this money, $125,000, the partners themselves would cover the other $75,000. So it is a collaborative venture. And when it goes forward and that work is done, each of the partners will, in their own marketing budgets and communication budgets, fund any other things that go forward for their organization. And there's a possibility that there might be some partnerships formed to develop some of the materials. So I think this is critical because it fits the goals of the OCP, administration's strategic plan, council's vision, and the ROC mandate. And so I ask you to support this. It's critical work that will capture the strength and assets of Regina. And the strongest part of it is, I think, that it is a collaborative strategy with many partners, which means that it will make much more of an impact than if just the City of Regina, for instance, or just ROC did this project.
Thank you, Councillor. Before we go to other questions, I have Mr. Onright, if you have anything you want to add to the project itself for clarification. Mr. Onright?
Through you, Your Worship, as Councillor Young has indicated, this project, this is the first phase. The work that ROC will do will be to broker the work of the project, similar to what was done in the ITC project, so the International Trade Center, the initial work that was done there to determine the viability of that project, which has now moved forward. The work that ROC will do in this project will be to work with the 20 or 22 partners that are currently involved with them. They will also be working with the City of Regina, and it will determine how to best tell the story of Regina, why people would want to come here, invest money, bring events here, major events here, and how they would promote that. So that's the oversight.
Thank you, Mr. Onright. Councillor Bryce, you're next.
Thank you. This is kind of unusual to have something like this come forward. Did ROC request this money and were turned down, or how did it get to the floor today?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, ROC put a proposal forth through the F&A committee because it is related to promotion, which is what that fund is used for.
So this soon-to-be nonprofit corporation, is there not a process that we would normally go to request funding for projects like this that everybody else would have to go to?
Mr. Onright?
Through the, this normally, or could have potentially come through the budget process, but because it was after the budget process, this funding has been used for other special projects similar to what ROC is requesting the money for in the past. The ITC, I believe, I'll ask Mr. Holden to clarify, but I believe the funding for that project came out of the F&A fund.
Okay. What do we have that is measurable to see if this money will be successful in its use? I know it's going for marketing and brokering work and communication. So what are we doing different this year with this Advantage program, and how are we going to know it's successful? What are we measuring it against, or are we?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, first and foremost, the financial plan that's put together for the project will be a measure. And I think the outcome is to have defined tools that can be used by the stakeholders and by the partners to be able to go out and tell the story. So I think the project is relatively finite in terms of it's not about the phase 2. I think that's where there was a bit of confusion, is that this money was going to be used for media advertising and so forth, for telling the story. This money is being used for creating the tools to tell the story.
So where's the money for the rest of it for phase 2 coming from then? Are we going to get another request like this next year?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, that funding, as Councillor Young had pointed out, will come through budget process. So if ROC required funding to go market, that would be through their budget process. And the partners that are involved, Airport Authority, Science Center, would be through their own respective budgets.
Okay. How much of a partner is the City of Regina? I read there was 22 other partners. So what percentage is Regina in this?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, not sure that I can define it as a percentage. I'll maybe ask Mr. Holden to add his comments in terms of the involvement communications we'll have in the project.
Mr. Holden?
Through you, Your Worship, I think it's really important to reinforce that it's about developing key message and tools and tactics that all of the partners can then leverage with the investments they're already making. So we have the University of Regina, we have the City of Regina, we have Evraz Place, and there's 22 others. We're all spending money in marketing and promoting our various venues, facilities, our community overall. So what this will do, it'll give us some targeted messaging so we can try and attract economic development if that's your area of expertise in business, or attract tourism, convention, major sporting events. The investments that this council and community has made in terms of the International Trade Center and the new stadium, those are things that we need to be able to leverage and promote. And that's the work that this $125,000 as seed money will leverage. So it'll definitely improve or strengthen the dollars that are being invested by all those organizations. And as was indicated by Councillor Young, there's probably some opportunity for new partnerships or enhanced partnerships. So the outcome will be, I think, in the success of the new activity that's being attracted into our community, into the various organizations at the various venues.
Thank you very much for that answer.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was one of the councillors at the Finance Administration Committee that was confused by all of this. and I'm not sure I'm still not confused. Councillor Bryce asked many of the questions that concern me, but let me ask them again to see if I can get some precision. First of all, can you tell me something concrete that this money is going to be spent on? I've read the report that was before the Finance Committee again. It speaks of strong communications collateral, enhanced marketing and communication tools, focused narrative of Regina. Do we need $125,000 to do that? Mobilize positive feelings of community of Regina by providing a new platform for civic pride. This is just too abstract for me. Can you give me some concrete examples of what we're talking about here?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, well, I think on page 6 of ROC's report, it defines exactly what the money is going to be used for. And I think the work that they are going to do within the project is going to define the tools that will be used. That is the work. I don't know that right now, what that actually looks like, but as the project moves forward through the collaboration of the 20 partners, the City of Regina, that is what they're going to define.
I know one of the tools is not a hammer. Give me an example of a tool, please.
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, so it may look at how they are going to utilize the website and social media to best tell the story. So how are they going to use that as a tool?
Thank you. Now, there's going to be 22 other partners, I think, were mentioned involved in this. Have any of those partners stepped up to date? Have any of them got, to use a sports analogy, any skin in the game here, or are we first in?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, we are first in. I'm not aware of the other partners' funding at this time.
Do we have any guarantee that they will, other partners will step up? I ask that because at the Finance and Administration Committee, the Regina Airport Authority specifically said they weren't stepping up with money. Do we have any guarantee that anybody is going to step up with money? And if not, do we have a plan B if they don't?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, at this time, I believe that is the work ROC is doing with the other partners to see what the contributions will be.
Two other questions, Your Worship. In the 2015 budget, I believe ROC had an allocation of $1.1 million. We've just appointed $1.7 million to ROC, so over a $500,000 increase, over 50%. That's a substantial increase. Why? I thought that kind of money was to be used exactly for this kind of project. Why is this not taken out of the budget of the 2016 budget that we allocated to ROC of $1.7 million?
Mr. Onright?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have that answer at this moment. That would be a question for Mr. Lee.
Okay, thank you. One last question, and I want to be very clear about this. Will this council see again a request for this kind of thing, or is this a one-off? Now, I asked this at the Finance and Administration Committee. The answer I got seemed to say that ROC could be coming back again to council for this kind of thing. I understand now that maybe it's a single request that won't be repeated. Can I get clarity on this issue?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, so the fund itself is being moved to the Community Investment Grant Program next year, or in 2016. So this fund will not exist in future years. The one-off question, I would say yes, this is a one-off. This is a one-time project. Any further funding would have to come through the budget process. So through ROC's budget, if they were increasing or wanted to increase funding, that's how the request would come through. The Community Investments Grants Program has an adjudication process. So if there was a request through that, it would have to go through the current process, which is the adjudication.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your answers. Your Worship, I have considerable misgivings about this, as my questions would have indicated. I still feel that the level of generality is too broad to bring towards council. I also feel that there isn't an adequate business case for this proposal. All of that said, I'm going to support it subject to a motion that I wish to put now. It's a motion simply to require that ROC report back within 6 months to the Finance and Administration Committee on the progress of this project, the Regina Advantage project.
Have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Ing seconds that. Those who want to discuss the amendment? That the ROC report back to Finance and Administration within 6 months to the Finance Administration Committee. On the amendment.
Just to clarify, are you asking them to report back as a whole, or are you also whether they've got other funding in place? Because if they don't have 200,000, should it not be contingent on that as well?
Councillor Hawkins, this is staff's report you're looking for.
Your Worship, I would ask them to report back as to the progress that has been made with respect to this project. Now, if they didn't have further funding, I would have thought that's something that they will want to indicate very clearly in the progress, in their progress report.
So we're all clear on the amendment. I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
Thank you, Your Worship. With that, I'll just say that I'll be watching this very closely, and I'll be supporting I'll support the motion on the understanding that I will watch, and I'm sure the committee will watch, how this money is being spent and to what effectiveness it is being put. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to stand to support the motion that's before us this evening. That when we were at Finance and Admin, we did have a number of the 22 partners show up, and some like the University, the Airport Authority, and they were pretty clear that their role was to incorporate all this key messaging, a lot of the marketing material into their existing sort of media networks and marketing. That, for example, the Airport Authority talked about the number of international seminars and meetings they go to, looking at trying to attract new airlines to come to the province, et cetera. Same thing, the university has a large reach in terms of expanding. So I think that, we've had 10 years of a very successful economic boom or rush here in the province and in the city. I think during that time, Regina and Saskatchewan is starting to get not only national but international recognition. And a lot of the marketing and I think awareness is, we were kind of on a free ride, because I can remember seeing Saskatchewan mentioned on Business News Network and on CNN and other quite well-established networks. And so that's all sort of, I think, slowing down and going away, because when you look at a lot of the stuff they reported was economic indicators, and as we all know, we don't have sort of those positive economic indicators right now. So I do fundamentally believe that we do have a good story, that with the low Canadian dollar, we've got a lot of local manufacturing that I think we're positive is going to sort of pick up a lot of the slack. And so I think that now is the time we have to get our story out. And I think it's important that we've got 22 other agencies that can all deliver that same message to their own audiences. I think collectively it's the right time. I think that we can't wait till next year, because we've still got a few bottoms to bounce on, I think. So because of that, I think I would like to support the motion and see us move forward quickly on getting our messaging together and getting it out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Councillor Fraser.
Okay, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start by saying I sit on the Finance and Administration Committee. I feel like the debate around this exact same motion more or less was a healthy one. We talked about value for money, some of the issues we talked about here, but also the process for how this money should be distributed. It's a fair chunk of change, $125,000, and I think there were some good points made at that meeting about maybe the regular budget process being the right process to deliver that sort of money. So the question I have for administration is a technical question, actually, about delegation of authority. So this council, by order, or past councils by order, have delegated authority to some committees. We don't do it a lot here. Other cities do it a lot more, but we have a few small decisions that can be made by committee versus having to come to council. This is one of those decisions. You know, the Budget and Finance Administration Committee has been delegated the authority to sign off on where that money goes without the approval of council. So I'm just wondering if it's appropriate really for this to come back to this council. I mean, in this case, it's a committee made up completely of councillors, right? So we all have the chance here to speak publicly and defend our stance or whatever. But I think, you know, we have committees with delegated authority who have citizens on them. And I think, is this setting a precedent that if a citizen committee comes up with a decision, which is their delegated authority, and part of council or some of council doesn't like it, they can just overrule that decision? Could someone comment on that? Thanks.
Mr. Clerk, do you want to, it's a procedural question, or I can defer to the city manager?
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I will defer to Mr. Archer as well. But with respect to the determination of delegated authority to committees, that is council's prerogative as to which committees you wish to delegate and by what form. So that's something that we could certainly do a review of what the existing authorities are across the various committees. I mean, I don't have that off the top of my head, but that is something we could share with you, and then you could determine appropriately whether you wish to change them or to retain them as they are. Mr. Archer may have something additional.
Mr. Archer?
Your Worship and members of council, Mr. Nicol articulated well, I think, the role that committee delegation plays, or staff delegation for that matter. I would offer that in this instance, we have a motion on the floor of council for council's debate. It mirrors authority that's been delegated to a committee. My opinion is it stands alone, and council can decide.
Okay, well, then I appreciate that. It seems to me it's a legitimate motion. But my sentiment would be we should try to do more of that, actually. We should try to delegate more decisions to committees. And I'm not going to speak for this. I think Rock does a good job. Same as Councillor Hawkins' point, it has been clear to me that this is a bang for buck. This is the right use of a significant amount of money, $125,000. And also I would argue that if it is, we have a budgetary process. Rock already gets a significant amount of money from the people of Regina, and that would be the right process for this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other speakers to the report, to the motion? Councillor Dowell, can you take the chair, please?
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'm going to rise in support of this report, and I do so for a couple of reasons, but have been articulated by members of council. But in particular, we're at a stage now, and Councillor Burnett began to touch on this. When we look at our city, as we promote our city both for tourism, for economic development, we're looking to the brand of the city, behind what's behind Infinite Horizons. When you think of Regina, what do you think of? What are the features that make you want to stay here, come here, visit here, invest here? There's a lot of work to be done on that. And this allocation of resources is meant to put those ideas together, to put those streams of thought together, so we can say in a cohesive way for the 22 partners who can agree with what's being said. This is, when I think of Regina, this is who we are. And this is a moving target. Every city does this. Every corporation does this. They do their brand. And this is an important element of us to fill that gap. And now someone's got to start the ball rolling. Someone's got to begin that process. And, of course, the City of Regina is being asked to put this money forward. And I dare say that the report from Finance, this was instigated by the administration asking ROC if they wanted to do this. So this money was available. So I think it's important to understand that perspective. Also, that it is seed money, and there will be other expenditures by the partners over time. I don't favor a second tranche of money on this. I think once you put this kind of money involved, we want the other partners to step up. So I would not envisage seeing another ask unless it was to be adjudicated under our normal process, but not another fund set aside for an additional $100,000. I would not favor that. I think this is seed money in the truest sense, to have the partners come forward as they have the capacity to put money to go forward. This is very important for us. If we don't tell our story, no one else will. If we don't speak to what those points are, no one's going to knock on our door and say, why should I come and invest here? The vehicles for this are going to be website, printed material, but how we say what we say, that's the part of the point of discussion. The last point I'll speak to is Councillor Fraser's comment about delegated authority. It is delegated clearly by City Council, but City Council reserves the right, as members of Council, to look at any issue that's related to affairs of any council, any committee of council. This is unusual to do this, but it is the right of a member of council to say, I want to address this issue. If you look at the issue of delegated authority, which I'm not prepared to do at this point for one issue, it's rare that this actually happens. It's something that's decided one way, comes back to council in another way. This is purview of council. It is under our bylaws, and it's wholly in the right to be here tonight and vote as you will, but I hope members of council will support this. It is a way to tell our story to the world. Thank you. Other speakers? Councillor Dow.
Thanks very much. I wanted to listen to this a little bit, not having been part of the previous discussion, and twice I heard reference to this fund and its reiteration in terms of next year into the community investment. So can I seek clarity on that, what that means? Is that an escalation of funds in community investments, or is this, I'm not sure.
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, the current community investments grant funding is about $3.2 million. The reserve and the remainder, the 195 moving forward will move into that. So for 2016, I believe it's going to be between 3.5 and 3.6 million. And then moving forward, the 200 or 195,000 will remain a part of that. So the community investments grant will move from 3.2 to 3.4.
Okay, so it's a little bit more. So this funding, again, not being on finance and admin, there was obviously a fund. Other than the International Trade Center, what else was this money used for in the past? Can somebody articulate that?
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, I believe the ask for Canadian Western Agribition comes out of that fund. I believe the Grey Cup funding came out of that special grants funding.
Okay. Okay, that makes it clear. Thanks. So the one part about this that caught my attention is that if there are more hands and more people doing more things, then you're going to get more done. I think that we're often that case where we are the first in. But I think part of the argument that I heard on the floor here is that if we're the only one in, that really doesn't work to that notion. And so to the motion that was the addendum to this is that really that's what we're asking. So I would hope that ROC would take that into consideration. This is just a clarity. We kind of earlier in the meeting changed the name of ROC. However, it doesn't happen tonight. When does it happen? When does ROC become the other entity?
January 1st.
Is it January 1st? Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Donnell. Other speakers to the question? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. We'll move on to Community and Protective Services, delegation of authority for the inspectors under the Forest Resources Management Act. Councilor Flegel. Actually, this is one before that. It's the pest control officers, 149.
I thought so. Yeah, CR 15-149 is looking for concurrence in appointing Russ Eric, Ryan Johnson, Corey Doka, and Caitlin Wilner to the pest control officers. That within 14 days, the City Council will pass the amendment of bylaws, and that City Clerk notify the Ministry of Agriculture on these appointments. So,
second for that, please. Councilor seconds it. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we'll move on to the other report. Councilor Flegel.
We'll do this one now. CR 15-150. And this is, again, recommendations on behalf of Community Protective Service for the Forestry Resources Management Act, that the city solicitor be instructed to make amendments to the forestry bylaw, and that the city solicitor be instructed to make amendments to the forestry bylaw and the appointment and authorization of city officials bylaw 2009 as further details in this report. Committee recommends the resolution to concur in recommendations does not require city council approval, but was brought forward for people to know what's going on.
Okay, a second for that, please. Councilor Ing seconds it. Discussion on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We move to Executive Committee, the council schedule meeting for next year.
Thank you.
Councilor
I will bring this forward. This is our meeting schedule and related amendments to the procedure bylaw. This covers City Council, Community Protective Services, Executive Committee, Finance and Admin, Mayor's Housing Commission, Public Works, Infrastructure, Regina Appeal Board, and Regina Planning Commission. If I could have a seconder.
Seconder, please. Councilor Flagel.
Council will know that there's a calendar attached to this, and by agreeing to this, then we can be public about all the meeting dates for the next calendar year.
Thank you. Any comments on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have two bylaws. Councilor O'Donnell.
Been asked to separate. I have a few here, and so I'll read them this way. I move, seconded by Councilor Hawkins, that bylaw number 2015-85 be introduced and read a first time. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council is now considering a bylaw respecting a report which you have considered just previously. 215-85 is with respect to additional procedural requirements as stipulated by recent amendments to the Cities Act. If there's anyone in the gallery who wishes to speak to council on this matter, I would ask that they indicate at this time. There is no one, Your Worship.
I'll call the vote on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councilor O'Donnell.
Okay, I move, seconded by Councilor Burnett, that the bylaw number 2015-85 be read a second time.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councilor Bryce, that the council hereby consents to bylaw 2015-85 going to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
Finally, I move, seconded by Councilor Young, that the bylaw 2015-85 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I'll move
Councilor
on now. I'll move on to, I move, seconded by Councilor Fraser, the bylaw number 2015-8 to be introduced and read a first time.
Mr. Clerk, you want to do it for this one? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councilor Murray, that bylaw 2015-8 to be read a second time.
Discussion.
In the chamber, I don't think.
Is it? I'll go to Councilor Hinks then, sorry.
Councilor Hinks then, okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councilor Flagel, that council hereby consents to bylaw 2015-82 going to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
And finally, I move, seconded by Councilor Vendura, that bylaw number 2015-82 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
And on
We
the
have two
last-
bylaws that were tabled from the December 14th meeting of council. Councilor O'Donnell.
I move, seconded by Councilor Hawkins, that bylaws 2015-75 and 2015-76 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Well, on behalf of the council, I wish everyone a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Best of the holiday seasons. It's been a very productive year, and wish staff who have worked very hard in support of this city council all the best over the holiday season, and get some rest. Next year might be just as busy. Thanks, everyone.